Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Secretary Napolitano. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your hard work and dedication. I think the President chose well when he put you into this position, and your background and history and experience, I'm sure, has come into use every single day that you've been in this position. I think I could ask you questions all day. I think that is probably the result of a state that has something like 75 different ports, 15 of them which are probably working ports for the interests that you care about, a border crossing at Blaine that is probably one of the busiest border crossings between U.S. and Canada in the country, and obviously many other related issues to that. So I'm going to try to get through these, and if you could...
I'll keep my answer short.
Thank you. The first one it has to do with, obviously, the border and custom agents, which, we were very involved here in increasing the funding to the northern border. We worked very hard as a delegation and a group of people to work on that for many years, and we were glad we got it. You may remember the Rassam case, in which a Port Angeles border agent was able to stop Mr. Rassam, who was the Millennium bomber who came through. So that was before we had the resources, and we're very well aware of the dangers there. But we've also had these incidents, and this weekend's paper, I think, said it best. Illegal immigrant gets $48,000 in lawsuit against border agents. And so that's what's going on, that we have this. I appreciate that Alan Burson visited the state, and so he's had a lot of meetings and he's had a lot of discussions with our stakeholders, and we really appreciate that. But we just have a lot of the Border Patrol acting very far away from the border in plain clothes, catching people by surprise. In this case, the border agents, in a plain car, plain clothes, came up to these two individuals who were at a bus stop. Now, it's probably within that 150 miles from the border, but it definitely is not next to the border. It was in Mount Vernon, Washington. So a good 45 minutes probably, at least, from the border. And so what I'm asking is, what steps are we taking to ensure that the border agents don't engage in racial profiling, and that all the Department of Homeland Security agencies are targeting the most significant threats at the northern borders?
Well, obviously, racial profiling is repugnant to the law, and we do not racially profile, and that is part of our training, it's part of our supervision, and it's part of the ethos. Secondly, a good border policy requires several things. It requires trained personnel on the ground who are properly supervised. It requires technology, and in some instances it requires infrastructure. And so both at the northern and the southern borders, what we are about is having strategies for those borders that meet the fact that there are different types of borders, different terrain, and all the rest, but nonetheless that combine in a strategic fashion those three elements.
Well, I think we need to continue to have dialogue in the Northwest of what's going on, because I think when we end up seeing lawsuits being settled against border agents, I think we have issues here that we need to address, and we appreciate your cooperation in working on that. A second issue, if I could, is obviously that U.S.-Canadian border is very important for shipping, and we've had my colleagues talk about security and safety of cargo and container traffic. What are we doing to help ensure that that all of North America adopts a regime for border security, so that we don't have Asian traffic deciding to go to Canada because they can skip the regime that the United States sets up for border security, only to have that cargo travel all the way across the country and maybe enter, someplace else that doesn't have that border security that you were establishing. So how do we get that North America regime established?
Well, if you're talking about, Senator, having almost like a perimeter policy around the continent, obviously that's somewhat difficult. But I mean,
I'm saying there's billions of dollars of business of cargo container going in. We're probably, 20% of all traffic coming from China. Now, if just up the road in Vancouver, they decide they're not going to meet a security regime and it's cheaper and faster to go through Vancouver, all that traffic is going to go there, and the U.S. is going to lose that transportation business. So what are we doing to help make sure that those ports adopt the same kind of regimes?
Well, I think, Senator, I am meeting regularly with my colleague, my counterpart on the Canadian side, as to what is necessary for security at those ports, because there are certain things that are constants with respect to be it integrated port security, be it air security, be it land border security. There are certain things that need to be done and need to be accomplished. But there are differences, and there are very real differences between the two countries, and I think part of that gets beyond my lane and gets into other departments in terms of negotiations as well.
Thank you. I see my time has expired, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I'd like to submit a question, if I could, to you about semi-submersible vehicles that are being used in the drug trade, and my understanding is they're growing in numbers. I don't know if we've thought about that as it relates to security, since these are one-way vessels and they can be used for drugs, they can be used for other things. But I'm going to submit that for the record and maybe get an answer from you. But I'd like to bring up two specific cases that are been really receiving national attention and see if I could get your help on that. The first is Ernesto Gamboa. He was an individual who served as a confidential informant and for the past 14 years assisted law enforcement in the dismantling of large and dangerous drug operations. He frequently put himself at risk. He worked with the Washington State Patrol, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the DEA, and INS, and with the Bureau of Immigration and Customs, ICE. So his cooperation was critical to the success of federal prosecutors in seizing hundreds of pounds of cocaine and methamphetamine, as well as large seizures of money and weapons. During all the time that he was cooperating with law enforcement over that time period, he was promised that he would get help with his immigration status. But instead, in July, he was detained by ICE and placed on removal, despite all of the good work that he had been doing previously for these various agencies. And so I'm expressing concern over this case because he's kind of in limbo. He can't work because he doesn't have paperwork, and he can't get, if he is returned to El Salvador, I'm sure he will likely be killed. And so if we don't help the Gamboas, who have been the informants for us, how are we going to recruit other people to helping us with finding drug traffickers and criminals? And so I would ask for your help in this case and understanding what we should do with Mr. Gamboa.
I'd be happy to look into it. This goes to the intersection between the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security, where Department of Justice, DEA, doesn't have authority to make immigration representations. Sometimes that gets lost in the shuffle. DEA needs to bring ICE in, or vice versa sometimes. So I think that illustrates perhaps what is happening with Mr. Gamboa. I'll be happy to look into the situation.
Thank you. The second one is a case, Alonzo Shahada, who, we talked about this border issue in my first round of questioning, and Senator Murray and I have asked you to defer the removal of Alonzo Shahada until the end of the 11th Congress. He is a case that would be, if the DREAM Act was law, he would obviously have the relief of that legislation. But he's a 22-year-old Peruvian national who has resided in the United States since childhood. And earlier this year, he literally took a wrong turn on I-5 and was detained when he accidentally crossed into Canada. And so now he faces deportation. He graduated from high school with honors, attended Olympic Community College, earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Washington. And so it's generated a lot of media attention in our state. And so I'm hoping that we can defer action on his case until the 111th Congress to see if we can get the DREAM Act passed. And so maybe Mr. Shahada, who has come to the United States as a child, not of his own doing, but has now been through our whole education system, will, not because he took a wrong turn on a freeway, be able to stay in the United States.
I think his removal will be or has been deferred. I will double check on that, Senator. But the situation you describe illustrates why President Obama is eager to have the Congress take up the whole issue of immigration reform. These situations happen in my department every day, day in and day out.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you looking into this further. I think he's gotten a temporary deferral, but I think that'll run out in January.
That may be right. I'll take a look.
So, if you could, thank you. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.